I'm so happy to be with you all today and to get to talk to you about digestion. Really, digestion is one of the big cornerstones of having good health. I work with a lot of clients who have complex conditions, and it can be a lot to unwind, but for sure, the starting point is almost always working with digestion. And so that's what we're going to dive deeply into. Remember last time I said, when we talked about protein, I said, you can all eat the just most perfect grass-fed, locally raised beef, the very best, highest quality protein. But if you can't digest it and you can't absorb it, you won't be able to reap the benefits. So that's why I wanted to go into all of this today. So today's talk, I want to focus a lot on the stomach acid myth and how we digest in the stomach for better digestion, because this pertains a lot to digesting protein. See this woman here and see this beautiful reflection? Really, the gut is very similar to this. In the same way this reflection shows who she is, your gut really is a reflection of your total body health. Because digestion really does have a very powerful influence on your health. It makes sure that the food that you eat is broken down and that the nutrients get into all the cells in your body. From energy to your immune system, what's happening in your body is a reflection of your digestive system. The digestive process supports us through pretty much three broad functions. There are more than three, but these are the basics. Of course, it provides the nutrients that we need. And it very much feeds into our immune system. There's something called the GALT, the gut-associated lymphoid tissue. 80% of our immune system is in our gut. And our digestion informs our microbiome health. So you might know that the microbiome has to do with the healthy gut bacteria that governs so much of our health. And our digestive process informs the microbiome. And all three of these are really essential for having great health. Now, poor digestion really is one of the root causes of different types of illness, as I mentioned at the very beginning. But the thing is, having digestive issues, it's so common that it just feels normal for a lot of people. So, for example, like having gas after a meal, or, oh, there's that stomach ache that I get, or, sometimes I just have to lie down after I eat, or I feel like I've got a bowling ball in my stomach after I eat and I've got to walk it off. And these types of things might just feel normal because they've been going on for so long. But just because they're common doesn't mean it's okay, doesn't mean it's actually normal digestion. Now, gut issues might be obvious, like bloating and distension, or constipation or diarrhea, heartburn, nausea, gas. Certain foods are just always hard to digest, or having food sensitivities or allergies. So if you look at this constellation of symptoms, you would go, yeah, that's all digestive stuff. But it's not always that clear. Digestive issues can also show up as chronic pain, skin conditions, inflammation. Autoimmune diseases are often linked to digestive issues. Feeling tired, feeling depressed, or neurodegeneration, and really a whole lot more. So it's not always an obvious link. And I made these little charts for you, these little graphics, and I'll be posting these in Heartspace and on Facebook as kind of a summary. And as we go, when I go through these concepts, you'll see I've just made little graphics, so you don't really have to take too many notes or remember everything I'll be posting. If we want to troubleshoot our digestion, I love talking about how digestion works. Often I ask people how digestion works, and very commonly people will say, well, you chew up your food and it goes into your stomach and it churns around and it shoots through your intestines and it comes out the other end. And that is true, but there's a little bit more to it. So as I said at the beginning, digestion begins in the brain when we look at our food. And how often do we skip this step? We just, we're watching TV or we're driving or mindlessly eating, because what happens when you look at your food or when you smell your food is this is what triggers the salivary glands to begin to produce saliva and certain enzymes. And those enzymes are going to be ready and in preparation for the next step. So it's really important to look at your food, important to smell your food. And then next we come to the mouth. And here we want to chew our food really well, because this will produce even more salivary amylase. This is this enzyme that helps us break down carbohydrates. So if you find that you just kind of, go chew, 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 swallow, well, that's going to make a whole lot of work for your stomach and further down in the process. And I don't know about you guys, but as kids, we learned to eat really, really fast. And then later on in life, when I was in business, I often didn't have much time to eat. So I really continued that habit of eating fast. And it's not an easy habit to break. So sometimes we have to really consciously stop and notice how many times we chew. We want to chew 30 to 40 chews per bite, believe it or not, maybe even more. So sometimes it's a good time to slow down and even count. And then, of course, when we chew our food, it's broken down into smaller pieces, and then that makes less work further down in the chain. So next, you're going to swallow your food. And at this point, it's called a bolus. So that chewed up food is called a bolus now. It's going to go down your food pipe, the esophagus, and then it's going to come to your stomach. And here, gastric juices are going to be made, and they're made out of mucus and enzymes and something called hydrochloric acid, or HCl. So memorize that HCl, because we're going to talk about that a lot today. And this is going to specifically break down proteins. It's going to break down all foods, but a lot of protein is broken down here in the stomach. Then your stomach muscles are going to churn the food. So these enzymes and this muscular contraction, sometimes in nutrition, we call this the churn and burn. So we churn and burn the food, and then it's going to go on to the next step. So this soupy food, now it's soupy, it's called chyme, C-H-Y-M-E. And it's going to go into the first part of the small intestine, which is called the duodenum. And this is the part that I think is super exciting. So the acidic pH of your stomach contents, now it's coming into your small intestine. It's that acidic pH that's going to signal your pancreas, that's what's circled here, to produce some enzymes and hormones. So the first, it's going to produce bicarbonate, and this is going to help reduce the level of acidity. So you want your stomach contents to be nice and acid, and because it's acid, it's going to signal the pancreas now to make it alkaline, more alkaline, because you don't want acidic food to go into your small intestine. It can create some damage there if it's too acidic. That low pH, the high acid, is also going to signal your pancreas to produce enzymes so that you can digest carbohydrates and fats and protein. And that acidic pH is going to trigger your small intestine produce this hormone called CCK, or cholecystokinin. So you don't have to remember all this technical jargon, but the way all of these organs work together, I think, is super exciting, but it's all based here on having acidic pH. So the acidic contents are going to trigger the pancreas to produce bicarbonate, enzymes to further break down your food, and this hormone that is going to tell your gallbladder to release stored bile. And this is what's going to help you break down fats. All of this is based on having enough acid, that acidic pH, to signal what happens next in the chain of command. And I love how it all works together. It's like a symphony, all working together. So in the small intestine, this is where we actually absorb 90% of our nutrients. We break it down into smaller particles. Carbohydrates are going to be broken down into glucose. Proteins are going to be broken down into polypeptides and amino acids. And fats are going to be broken down into fatty acids and glycerol, and you're going to absorb it that way. And then next, it's going to all move on to the large intestine. So all the leftovers, the indigestible fibers, bile, water, and slept off cells are going to be sent through a one-way valve, the ileocecal valve, into your large intestine. Bile, mucus, saliva, and water are all going to be recycled. Our digestive system is super efficient. And then they're going to be sent to the liver to be filtered and redistributed. And then feces, poop, is going to be formed and expelled. So that's basically how your digestive system works. And if you want to see that again, I've made you all a graphic that goes into it in great detail, and you can always refer to that. So I'll be posting that for you. Now, when you have digestive issues, there are 3 lenses we can use to help you troubleshoot, and it's really important to do them in a certain order. So first, we want to go north to south. There's this north to south axis. Everything we just talked about, from the brain to the mouth, all of that north to south action, we always want to troubleshoot north to south. So if, for example, you're having a problem in your small intestine, say you have SIBO, small intestine bacterial overgrowth, and you try to just treat that directly, but you forgot to look at your food, or you're not chewing your food well, or there's a blockage in your esophagus, or you're not digesting, you're not making enough hydrochloric acid, well, this is not going to be an effective intervention. We always want to go north to south. So this is one lens. And I'll send you all of this. You'll have lots and lots of reference. Then we want to look at the severity of digestive dysfunction. We start from left and we go to right. So often, of course, we start with normal digestion. Some of the first signs of digestive dysfunction are what we call dysbiosis. This is where your microbiome is getting out of balance, and maybe you're getting some gas or some bloating or some distension, some digestive difficulties. It moves on to some digestive enzyme deficiency. Some people will get inflammatory bowel disease or gallbladder dysfunction. Then there's gastritis, inflammation of the stomach, intestinal permeability, sometimes called leaky gut, or SIBO, small intestine bacterial overgrowth. And on the far end of the syndrome or the far end of the spectrum is malabsorption syndrome. This is someone who is usually very thin, doesn't matter how much they eat, they just can't absorb their food. They often have diarrhea. So this is kind of the severity of dysfunction. And don't be alarmed if you have some of these. Many of us have these syndromes. We may even have several of these syndromes. There's always a way to move through these digestive dysfunctions and to kind of systematically troubleshoot what's going on. And that's what I'm hoping to provide for you today. Now it gets more complicated because there are mechanisms that can be driving the severity, mechanisms that can be driving this north to south dysfunction. And I'm just going to list them for you here. We couldn't possibly go into them all. I'll send you a graphic. So this is where we overlay the north to south axis, we overlay the severity, and then we have all the mechanisms that can be underlying what it is that's causing this dysfunction. Now, it might just be that you don't chew your food well enough, and then that's all that you need. But for some people, when it starts to get more severe, we really have to go into some of the underlying mechanisms. And this is a pretty thorough list of what these mechanisms are. I will send you this link and you can study this in more detail. Because, you know, this can be an awful lot to unwind. So where do we start? I want to start today with talking about the stomach. Now, when we troubleshoot, we are going to go north to south. We always start with the brain, but I want to focus on stomach because I said we'd focus on digesting protein. And this is an area in the stomach where a lot of things can go amiss. And it's an area, believe it or not, that's overlooked. Hydrochloric acid, HCl, because it affects everything downstream. And when we look at the severity of dysfunction in digestion, hydrochloric acid and stomach function affects everything downstream. And when we look at the possible mechanisms behind what's going on with your digestion, it's often low stomach acid that leads to poor digestion, that leads to everything else. So this is where I want to start. And what I want to tell you is that stomach acid is good. Now, a lot of you already know this, but for some of you, you're going to go, huh? No, stomach acid is really bad. So I want to talk a little bit about stomach pH and pH in general, and I'll do this really quickly. The pH scale, you might remember from your school days, ranges from 0 to 14. 0 is the most acid, 14 is the most alkaline. 7 is neutral, like water. Blood is very close to neutral. But hydrochloric acid, look at that orange arrow. It's really, really, really acidic, right up there with battery acid. And our stomach is designed to house that kind of acid. Why? Because that's what we need to break down our food. So our stomach acid tends to be between 1 and 3 on the pH scale. It's very, very acidic. And when you eat acidic foods and and alkaline foods, they tend to neutralize each other. But we really want our stomach to produce that nice stomach acid. So I say it again, stomach acid is good. And if you want to know more about that, here's a really great book. It's an easy read that goes into it in great detail. And these doctors spent their entire careers really studying stomach acid and seeing how it is often the root of a lot of illness, having less and less stomach acid. And it's really pretty common. So this doctor, Jonathan Wright, says that when we carefully test people over the age of 40 who are having heartburn, indigestion, and gas, over 90% of the time we find inadequate stomach acid. And here's a chart from his book. And you can see that when someone's around, when they're young, 11 to 20, they make a lot of stomach acid. And over the years, we make less and less stomach acid. It looks like less than a third of the stomach acid of when we were younger. So often people think, and doctors might even tell us, you make more stomach acid as you age, and that's why you need antacids. It's actually the opposite. We make less and less. And this makes our digestion less and less efficient. So this is confusing because I know when I grew up, there was this commercial on TV, and I'm going to date myself. How many of you remember this commercial where they talked about this tablet you could take that would soak up 47 times its weight in excess stomach acid? So even as a little girl, I knew that stomach acid is bad and you need to take tablets to soak it up because you don't want stomach acid. Do you remember this ad? I don't remember the name of the product. But really, excess stomach acid was never the problem. We need that hydrochloric acid to digest our food so that we get enough nutrition to stay healthy. And hydrochloric acid is really our friend. But it's having stomach acid in the wrong place. That's the problem. So let's talk about that. When food isn't broken down properly in the stomach, the contents are going to ferment. And what's going to happen then is those gases are going to force the valve at the top of the stomach open. And then that very acidic content is going to shoot up into your esophagus. And that is not good because now these acidic contents, which are supposed to be housed in your stomach and locked in there tightly for the churn and burn, it's going where it doesn't belong. It's going up into the esophagus and it can burn the delicate tissues there. And this can lead to GERD or gastroesophageal reflux disease. And so often we think, well, I should just take some antacids, right? Because it's just all too acidic. So I say not so fast. I'm not saying no, I'm saying not so fast. Let's rewind a little bit. So your stomach produces hydrochloric acid to digest your food. And if you had enough acid in the first place, the food would never ferment. You would not have reflux for the most part, and the food would move on to where it's supposed to go. It would go further down the chain into the small intestine, with the exception of some rare disorders. So this is talking about how normal digestion should work. And this does not necessarily pertain to everybody, but for the most part, this is how digestion should work. So if you take antacids, you're not going to be able to efficiently digest your food because you're raising the pH of your stomach and you really can't break down the food well. So that can be a problem. You're not going to get the full benefits of digestion, like having enough nutrients, having a good immune response, having a healthy microbiome. So let's talk about signs of low hydrochloric acid. How do I know if that pertains to me? Well, there's a lot of them. One of the big clues that you may have low hydrochloric acid or stomach acid is protein is hard to digest and you just don't like it. You look at meat and you go, that looks bad. I don't want it. You just tend to avoid it. Excess belching. Again, one of those things that might seem normal, but maybe it's not so normal. Having bloating or gas after a meal. Having bad breath. Diarrhea or difficult bowel movements. Undigested food in your stools. Feeling full during a meal. Do you ever have that experience where you take 2 or 3 bites and you go, I feel kind of full? Food just sits in your stomach. And it's hard to digest certain fruits and vegetables, not just protein. Having chronic yeast infections, cracked or peeling fingernails, rosacea. Have you ever seen people get like dilated blood vessels in the cheeks or in the nose or red in the face. Eczema, acne, iron deficiency anemia can be related to low stomach acid. Getting food poisoning a lot. Have you ever been through periods in your life? I know I did in my 30s where I was always getting these funny 24-hour flus. Little did I know it was, in my case, low stomach acid. And we'll get into why that is in a minute. Anyway, I made a chart for you so you don't have to remember that. You'll see here's a list of everything I just went over. Suppose you do have low stomach acid. What are some of the further consequences? Well, it's going to create a whole cascade of events that your body's going to have to deal with. Of course, it's going to be hard to digest protein. And as we talked about last time when we talked about protein, this can make it hard to absorb your protein. And we need protein to benefit our immune system in a way that enables us to fight infection. So low protein can lead to being vulnerable to infection, muscle wasting, risk of bone fracture, and just generally having crummy skin, hair, and nails. Now, some minerals like iron, zinc, and copper require an acidic environment in the stomach for absorption. So when you eat your food, if it's not acidic enough, you might be chronically low in these minerals. And this can lead to anemia or thyroid dysfunction. Often people with low thyroid, the beginning of all of that was low stomach acid. Immune system dysfunction, wounds that don't heal, feeling tired, having chronically low B12, and much more. So when you have low stomach acid, all of that intricate signaling we talked about doesn't happen efficiently. Your pancreas doesn't get the signal to release the enzymes to digest carbs. Your gallbladder doesn't get the signal to release bile. So then it's hard to digest fats. When your stomach acid is low, then the contents don't get sanitized. So think about that. It's kind of weird that even though your stomach is in your body, this is actually the outside world inside your body here. And so this is where some decision-making happens. What do you want really entering the inside of your body? It's really still on the outside when it's in your stomach. It's going to start to go inside when it enters your small intestine and you start absorbing what's there. Do you really want those microbes to enter? And so of course you don't. And when you don't have enough acid, then the stomach contents aren't going to get sanitized. This can lead to small intestinal bacterial overgrowth and other conditions. You can have unhealthy bacteria or mycotoxins. These are byproducts of mold or viruses or parasites moving into your intestines. You can end up with candida or a parasitic infection. This can lead to autoimmune disease or leaky gut, intestinal permeability. So see, there's lots of consequences of having low stomach acid. You can also have food sensitivities or allergies, food allergies as a result. Low stomach acid, as I mentioned at the beginning, can inform the health of your microbiome, which is a cornerstone for good health. And then further, dangerous bacterial endotoxins. So let me explain what endotoxins are. In your body, we always have bacteria, but there are certain types of bacteria, specifically gram-negative bacteria. They have a life cycle. They live and they die. And when they die, they can produce some pretty toxic byproducts. And one of them that's particularly tricky is called lipopolysaccharide, or LPS. And this can make its way into your tissues. And this is the image I always use for LPS. Because LPS is not a good thing. You don't want that entering into your body. LPS has been linked to Parkinson's disease and even diabetes, definitely chronic inflammation, liver disease, and really much, much more. At some point, we might do a whole talk on leaky gut if that interests you, and I can go more into endotoxins. But I like this quote from Dr. David Perlmutter. He's one of my favorite authors. He's written a lot of great books. He says, if there were ever a clear biological villain that flips on the inflammatory pathways in the body, it would be lipopolysaccharide. So where does this all begin? It all begins with low stomach acid. And there can really be some serious fallout with low HCl. So I'm going to just show you a list of conditions and diseases that have been linked to low stomach acid. Again, I'll send you this chart later. Notice how these are all autoimmune diseases, most of them. And to that list, this list above comes from the Institute for Functional Medicine. To that list, Dr. Wright is going to add some more. Anemia, cardiovascular disease, stomach cancer, depression, aging, accelerated aging. And I made you a chart, so you don't have to memorize that. I'll send that to you. So even though many of us were taught that stomach acid is bad, low stomach acid can really be a problem and at the origin of a lot of disease. So we were taught to take medication for heartburn, take antacids. What about those medications? What about sometimes the cure making the problem worse? So I'm going to talk about this for a little bit. And this comes with a huge disclaimer here that if you're on antacids or proton pump inhibitors or H2 blockers, always follow your doctor's advice. But I do want to inform you a little bit about what some of these drugs do. I couldn't find global data on these drugs, but I can tell you that 15 million Americans routinely take proton pump inhibitors. Nexium, Prevacid, Prilosec, Protonix, or they take these H2 blockers like Pepcid, Tagamet, Zantac. And I'm sure in your country, a lot of people take these medications. But here's the thing, it's estimated that about 2/3 of people taking these drugs don't really need them. And these drugs can have very serious side effects. Multiple studies have found that taking these drugs long-term is linked to some kidney disease, to heart attack, stroke, higher infection rates, specifically an infection called C. difficile, and of course, poor digestion because you're lowering your stomach acid. So what I want to say is if you're routinely taking these drugs, especially if you've been on them for a long time, ask your doctor why you're taking them. Are you taking them just because you came in one day and said, I have heartburn? If so, you might want to do some troubleshooting, or it could be you have a real medical condition where you absolutely require that medication. You want to make sure that the root of your original complaint has been addressed. And of course, again, you're going to always follow your doctor's advice. Reflux is real. So I'm going to say two things here. I'm going to say there are dangers to these medications, but having reflux is real. And you, of course, are not going to overlook that. And you may absolutely need to be on those medications. But if you're on these drugs long-term, please sit down and have a discussion with your doctor about that. Now, one of the causes of reflux, of GERD, can be this valve at the top of your stomach. It's called the LES, or the lower esophageal sphincter, and it can become weak. And that might be the reason that you have reflux. And there's a lot of reasons that this can happen. And I made you a chart so we don't have to go over every one of these. But a lot of times that sphincter gets weakened by foods that you eat, or medications you take, or by certain physical positions and other things. I'll just send you this chart. But if the root cause of your digestive woes is low stomach acid, it's really important to try to figure out why. Why do you have low stomach acid? Could be the side effects of the medication, and often it's PPIs and H2 blockers, those things that lower stomach acid. That's the most common reason people have low stomach acid. But it's important to rule out H. pylori. It's a pretty common bacteria that lives in the stomach. It's an easy test. It can be done with just kind of breathing into a tube. So ask your doctor for an H. pylori test next time you get a checkup if you want. Can be a byproduct of aging. In that case, we can talk about some strategies. Some people like to take a digestive enzyme or some other things. We'll get into that in a minute. If you have low thyroid is often linked with low stomach acid. Could just be poor eating habits, rushing your meals. Sometimes your digestive tract degenerates, and this needs some troubleshooting. And sometimes it's neurological, like from a traumatic brain injury. This is more than we can go into, but I'll send you this chart. But I want you to know that there are a lot of considerations. So let's talk about how we get our acid in gear. There are some tips for improving digestion and reducing reflux. First, you want to start north to south. Make sure you look at your food before you eat it. Make sure you smell it, you savor it, and you chew it well. It may be, if you do that, game over and you're finished, and your digestion is much, much better. Of course, the quality of the food you eat is important. You want to have plenty of fruits and vegetables, healthy fats, well-sourced meats and fish, eggs and poultry, if it agrees with you, nuts and seeds, properly prepared grains and beans. Limit or eliminate processed foods, sugar, and alcohol. We've talked about all these things. And you may want to try to eat smaller meals. That may be helpful. Eliminate late night snacking and eating. This can be really helpful for a lot of people. Gravity is the friend of digestion. It helps the food move north to south. And even it feels good to lie down after a meal, eating and going to sleep doesn't help your digestion so much. Watch out for movements or exercises where you're bending over at the waist a lot. Watch out for tight-fitting pants, skirts, and belts, anything that binds in the waist. Some people find it helpful to elevate the head of their bed with 4 to 6 inch blocks. And again, talk to your doctor about medications you're taking. Just talk to your doctor and see if it affects your digestion. Maybe there's some alternative you could take. And always talk to your doctor if you're on a medication that reduces your stomach acid. Make sure, if you have a digestive issue, that you really have had a full workup. Make sure you find out why you have that heartburn. See if there's some root cause that hasn't been addressed. Now, here's something that you could also consider, and I was wondering if any of you are already doing this. Sometimes taking a digestive bitter before a meal can improve your digestion and help you make more stomach acid, or just the taste of something bitter, like dandelion leaf. Some people like to take a little apple cider vinegar before a meal because this can help improve the acid levels in your stomach. So if you want to do this, I like people to start really, really slowly. This is a very low dose, like a teaspoon in a quarter cup of water, and just sip that before a meal. You can build up to 1 to 3 tablespoons, but always mix it with some water. Some people like to drink this through a straw or rinse your mouth out afterward, because if you do this a lot, it's very acidic. It can be hard on your tooth enamel. And just see if that reduces your gas or bloating or improves your digestion. Now, if you do apple cider vinegar and you notice any burning in your stomach, maybe you have a gastric irritation, like an irritation in your stomach, and this might not be for you. Or maybe you took too much. Just drink a bunch of water, and that should raise the pH, or even add a little baking soda and drink that, and the burning should stop. Write all of this information down. Go back to a lower dose of the vinegar and see if that works for you. Or maybe vinegar is just not for you. Now, some people, as they age, or if they have very low stomach acid, might do well to take a very low dose of betaine HCl. This is hydrochloric acid. Now, if you do this, please work with someone who's really experienced, because they need to rule out any pre-existing conditions or contraindications. But make sure they also start at a very low dose, like 150 milligrams. It's actually not that easy to find. Most of these pills start at 500 milligrams. It's good to start at a super low dose and build up from there. So work with your healthcare provider on how to do this. But I did want to just name that some people find it beneficial to take the HCl. And we're coming to the end here. Another great thing you can do is to keep a food diary. List the foods and drinks that you take in each day. List out how much water you drink, the quantities of food you're eating, any supplements you're taking, how much exercise you get, how you feel that day, how your energy is, and list any digestive symptoms. Keep track of all these things. This data is invaluable. Even keep track of your poop. Do you know about the Bristol stool scale? If you go and see a doctor or a nurse, often they use the Bristol stool, and you can walk in there all informed and say, hey, I'm having a Bristol stool type 2. I'll send you this chart, but this is often what we ask for to tell, well, what's a normal stool? A normal stool should look like this, kind of like a sausage or a snake, not too runny, not too hard. So I'll send you this chart and you can see how your stool stacks up. So do keep this diary. It gives you really some powerful data to help you troubleshoot your digestion. So I know this was a lot of information, and I will be posting a blog on the Jing Tai Chi website so you can review all of this. I'll be posting a lot of the graphics. Really, I can't overestimate how important this is to troubleshoot your digestion. Even if you think you have great digestion, take another look at it, because further down the line, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now, you will thank yourself. Your entire health can take a different trajectory just by troubleshooting your digestion now. And I'm also going to send you this graphic. This is kind of a summary of everything we talked about today. When I see you next time in the next round of Jing Tai Chi, we're going to talk about sugar, eating sugar, and also blood sugar balance. And here are my references for today. And I'm just going to come out of this now. Okay, so some people are writing interesting, very helpful. Good. Well, even if you take one little bit away, Arlen says, did not know this. Very helpful to begin to understand. Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, I mean, I know it was a lot of information. I try to present the big picture. And then if you just take even a little bit, just think north to south. Think looking at your food, think chewing more. And I know I brought up a lot about medication, and I did that because so many people just routinely pop antacids and don't realize that they really can be slowing down their digestion. Of course, always following our doctor's advice.